Welcome to the interresponse time section. In this section, we will be referring to interresponse time as IRT. Let's take a quick look at when we can collect IRT data.
Are we done with session yet so I can take Henry to the dog park? I just gotta finish up these notes real quick and then we'll be done. Is it time yet? Is it time yet?
Of course, we're going to be using another performance monitoring tool. This one has been adapted for the IRT data collection procedure. As you may remember from before, this is where your supervisor will put his or her initials and date. These are the steps needed to correctly gather IRT data. This is where he or she will put a plus, minus, or NA. This is where the supervisor will total the correct percent of implementation. Your supervisor may leave any comments in this area about your correct percent and helpful tips on how to implement. We should take a closer look at the necessary steps for the IRT data collection procedure. The first step is the RBT gathered all necessary materials before beginning the session. The next step is that the RBT reviewed target behaviors and operational definitions provided in client's program. The third step talks more about the datasheet. So, the RBT wrote his or her initials at the top of the datasheet, recorded the target behaviors to be observed, recorded the start time of the observation session. Step number 4 is that the RBT set the stopwatch to 0 minutes and 0 seconds. This will look similar to this. And each time the target behavior ended, the RBT pressed Start on the timer. Each time the target behavior started, the RBT pressed Stop on the timer. Once the RBT collected data on all occurrences, they wrote the interresponse time on the datasheet and restarted the timer. When the observation session was over, the RBT recorded the end of the observation session. Then, the RBT calculated the average IRT to the occurrence of the target behavior. If you need help remembering how to do this, you may look here, or look back at the PowerPoint on interresponse time. Now that you have seen the steps, let's go back to the example from before. This is Jessica, the RBT, and this is Chelsea, the client. I'll be filling out the performance monitoring tool for Jessica, the RBT. I'll start by putting my initials and the date. Jessica gathered all the necessary materials. As you can see, she has her datasheet and is using her phone as a stopwatch. She reviewed the target behaviors before the session began. Let's pull up her datasheet. Okay, so she wrote her initials at the top. She recorded the target behaviors and the start time of the observation. Let's pull up her stopwatch and see if she is collecting this data with high fidelity.
Are we done with session yet so I can take Henry to the dog park? I just gotta finish up these notes real quick and then we'll be done. Is it time yet? Is it time yet? Is it time yet? Is it time yet? No, she's not gonna let us both ever. Is it time yet?
Each time the client said, "Is it time yet?" Jessica started the timer. When the client started asking, "Is it time yet?" Jessica stopped the timer. We're going to give her a plus for step number 6. Okay, great. Let's check her datasheet. It wrote the interresponse time on the datasheet and restarted the timer. She recorded the session end time, and look right here. You will see the average IRT. 100%. Very cool. Looks like our training worked. Let's look at another example. This time, Jessica will be collecting data on Chelsea's pen tapping behavior. Since this behavior is quick in duration, Jessica will be using a different timer that will help her collect data. On this timer, she will press the lap button on the bottom each time the behavior occurs. Here we go. Once again, I'll start by putting my initials and the date. Jessica gathered all the necessary materials. She reviewed the target behaviors before the session began. Let's pull up her data sheet. So, the RBT wrote his or her initials at the top of the data sheet, recorded the target behaviors to be observed, recorded the start time of the observation session. Let's watch Jessica in action again. Each time the pen was tapped, Jessica pressed the lap button. As you can see here, the inter-response time can be found at the bottom of the timer. The times between the behaviors were calculated and can be seen here. Now let's make sure her datasheet matches. Looks like the data she recorded is correct. She'll get a plus for this step. Looks like Jessica also recorded the session end time. Nice. And here we can see the average IRT. Perfect. Looks like another 100%. Cool. Now it's time for our last example. In this example, we will be visiting a session done with Ernesto and Layla. This is Ernesto, the RBT, and this is Layla, the client. Ernesto will be collecting IRT data on the amount of time between sips of tea. Let's start with our performance monitoring tool. Looks like Ernesto has his timer, but he doesn't have his data sheet. We are going to give him a minus for step 1. Ernesto reviewed the target behavior, which is drinking. Since Ernesto doesn't have his data sheet, we will also have to mark the sub-steps under step 3 as a minus. Let's pull up Ernesto's timer and watch him collect IRT data.
I'm thirsty.
Here you go.
When Layla took the drink away from her mouth, Ernesto pressed the start button on the timer. each time Layla put the drink to her mouth, Ernesto pressed the stop button. He'll get a plus for steps 4, 5, and 6. Ernesto did not record any data on the data sheet. He'll get a minus for this step. As you can see here, Ernesto received a 44% on his procedural integrity because he did not collect data on a data sheet. As his supervisor, it is my responsibility to help remind Ernesto the importance of data collection on the data sheet so I can make data-driven decisions that benefit the client. I will work hard to retrain so Ernesto can get 100% next time. We've got this. Teamwork. That's all we have for the inter-response time data collection section.